Um, okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to session 2 of the Pathway to Chaplaincy series. So excited to see you all. Some of you I know joined session 1, so excited that you all are back for, inshallah, some more great information, some more great conversation. My name is Zakia Haq. I am the Executive Director of AMC, of the Association of Muslim Chaplains. I know we have folks here who are not members of AMC, and so just a very quick introduction to the organization. Also, the Association of Muslim Chaplains is a professional membership association for Muslim chaplains in North America, so United States and Canada. We have over 250 members across sectors, including healthcare, education, so campus chaplains, corrections, military, and community, alhamdulillah, and growing. And then, just a quick introduction to the series. I know you all have probably seen the sort of the lineup, the 5 series that we have, the 5 sessions that we have as part of the series. And so really the series is designed to introduce the various sort of steps along the journey of becoming a Muslim chaplain. So last week we held the session on Islamic chaplaincy programs in the U.S. And so that recording is available if folks are interested as well, inshallah. And we will also have sessions on endorsement, certification, as well as traditional Islamic sciences education coming up. So the focus of today's session, it's all about CPE, is to gain a greater understanding of what CPE is and the benefits of going through the CPE program and process. As you all may know, for some fields of chaplaincy, you need to have 1 or more units of CPE. For others, it's preferred but not required. And for other fields of chaplaincy, it doesn't matter at all. There is no baseline requirement of having CPE. And so, however, we do know that going through the CPE process is a cornerstone in the professional and personal formation of chaplains. It is a transformative program that we're going to hear much more about, inshallah, from our wonderful panelists. And it integrates theoretical knowledge, spiritual care, and personal reflection. And it really, from when you talk to people who have gone through the CPE program, it really prepares people to meet the spiritual and emotional needs of people, who are facing all sorts of situations in all of the various settings where our chaplains are working. So today's session will be a discussion of the CPE program between 4 CPE educators who also happen to be AMC members. They bring an enormous amount of expertise and experience in CPE to the conversation today. We have AMC member and CPE educator Shazana Durrani, who will be moderating the conversation today, and she will introduce the rest of her colleagues. Shazana, welcome. Thank you so much for facilitating the discussion today. Please go ahead.
Thank you, and salam alaikum to everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. As Zakia says, my name is Shazana. I will be your moderator for the session, and we are very grateful for the AMC for organizing the series and inviting us to be part of your webinar and for making time to be with us today. And before I introduce our esteemed educators, guests, I am iterating a little bit what Zakia was saying about what CPE is, which is really at the heart of it is how we professionalize chaplaincy. It's where theory and theology becomes practice, where we are not just meeting people where they're at, but we are also bringing our whole selves and our lived experiences in people in crisis. So hang on a minute. Let me share just this. You know what? I'm not going to do that. What you have here is just what clinical training CPE is about, which is not just bringing your whole self, but you are kind of sculpting a bit of your who you are, your lived experience that continues to shape and probably impact your care for the rest of your life. We are all educators under ACPE, the Association of Clinical Pastoral Education, and ACPE requires at least 1 unit, that consists of 100 to 125 educational hours and 275 to 300 clinical hours. And still, those numbers don't really say very much, other than This is what hopefully in the discussion today that you will hear what happens, really happens in the CPE process. CPE is an experiential learning. It's ACPE, clinical pastoral education, is an adult pedagogy that uses the clinical method of learning of action, reflection, new action, meaning all these things that you see on the slide here about care provision, really experimenting of care, your peer group reflection, one-on-one supervision, verbatims. These are all the things that you get to do to, well, understand more about who you are and the kind of care that you provide. And this is why I'm really excited for you to hear from our panelists today, people who not only have done CPE, but have walked through many, many students through it in many, many contexts. And beginning with myself, again, I'm Shazana. I'm an educator trainee and a CPE program manager at Goodwin Living, which is a care facility for older adults in Northern Virginia. And I would like to invite Tahara to introduce herself.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and good evening, depending on where you are. I see some familiar names and faces. I'm Tahara Akmal, and I am a ACPE certified educator at MedStar Washington Hospital Center in Washington, D.C. I started my CPE, started my first unit of CPE in 2007 and decided to go as far as I could with it. I became a certified educator with ACPE in 2015 and I've been supervising ever since, so about 11 years. So I will pass it over to Jawad.
Thank you, Zahra. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. It's good to be with you all. Zakia and Shazana, thank you for the introductions and framing this session. Uh, my name is Jawad Bayat, and I live in the I work in the greater Philadelphia area. I'm in New Jersey, and I commute to the greater Philadelphia area. I'm the manager of clinical pastoral education for Trinity Health Mid-Atlantic, and the hospital that I work at is in Langhorne, Pennsylvania. It's in the suburbs of Philadelphia. And uh, I guess, I did my first unit of CPE in 20, uh, when you got certified, Tahara, which was in 2015. And then for me, I did a year of staff chaplaincy, and then I got enrolled into a certified educator training program, the kind that Shazana's doing. It took me about 3.5 years, and I got certified in 2020. So I've been doing this work for about 6 years now. If there's anything else, I can share that. But um, yeah, is there anything else that might be useful? Okay. Ibrahim?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm Ibrahim Rahim. I am the program director for CPE for the U.S. Army. Um, my first unit was back in 2007, and I became interested in the CEC process and started that back in maybe 2012 and finished that in 2019, right when just before COVID. So, and I've been site directors for the Army treatment medical facilities and uh, did that for about 4 years, and then I became the director of the entire CPE program for the last 4 years.
All right. Thank you so much for that. If you hear, some acronyms that we are just spouting out, excuse us. We do that at ACPEs. I hear Ibrahim mentioning about CEC, which is a training process that I'm undergoing right now. It stands for Certified Educator Candidate. Just that's my role. All right, so we have about an hour before I will hopefully bring the discussion to an end for Q&A. And I would like to start with the question for our panelists. What is the moment or aspect of CPE formation that still shapes how you do chaplaincy and how you teach chaplaincy today?
I have one that comes to mind. If y'all don't mind. I wrote about this in the Mantle of Mercy, and I come back to it quite frequently. Um, it was the moment that I realized that, oh, there's a way to teach this, and I can do this long term. So basically, I was in my first unit of clinical pastoral education, and I think it was like a level 2 trauma hospital. So there was or level 1, there was a lot of death that I was encountering, and I was carrying a lot of weight, and I didn't understand how to process it all. And and at that point, I was just carrying it on, carrying it on. I think it was like 5 weeks in, like it was getting closer to the mid unit of the unit. And at that point, I didn't even know how to use the tools of CPE well. It's like that's actually the process. It's experiential learning. As you're engaging it, you're in the cohort, you're with your supervisor, and there are opportunities for it to come out, whatever needs to come out. And for me, that particularity came out during this session that I was with my one of my supervisors, and I was just like, this is what's happening for me. And then I started crying. And then she was listening and she helped me understand and make meaning of what was happening there. And then afterwards, I realized that I was doing patient care and now I was more present to them. I was able to pay attention to their feelings and like their own fears as I was facing my own. And I was like, oh wait, and there's a way to do this professionally, and like this can actually improve my care. And I actually I did a field placement at a university placement the year before because I went to Hartford Seminary at the time, and we needed to do two field placements. One was with CPE, and the other one was with wherever you chose. So I chose to do it at a university, and I was like, I should have done this before I did that. But anyways, at that time I didn't even know about what I could have been able to have done then. And so I did the care, and then as I got to the end, I'm like, this seems really interesting, and I had to continue with my residency, and but then there became more moments of that, and then that's when I pursued the work we're doing now, like the four of us are on right now. So that's like a moment of formation that I come back to that really solidified. Um, my trajectory. And a lot of that was also praying as well. But I realized like, oh wait, I can be one of the tools or hands of God in this world. You're supporting others.
Tahara Ibrahim, thank you so much, Joab. Wait, can I unmute you? Yeah, okay, thanks.
Okay. Okay, for some reason I can't see you. Okay. Um, I was thinking about my very first unit of CPE, and that was in 2007 at Ohio State Medical Center. And I didn't know many Muslims who were in a hospital setting, so I felt like I was trying to figure hospital ministry out on my own. And I remember this one patient, an older lady, and I walked in her room and she gave me the hand. She said, and just by looking at me, she says, "You don't believe what I believe." And I looked at her and I said, "Well, I would love to hear what you believe if you want to share it with me. I'd love to get to know you and hear what you believe." And then she stopped for a minute. She said, "Okay." And so I sat down and she tells me this wonderful story about her life and her faith and just all about who she is. And then she invited me to come back. And so I would go back, and then eventually she said, "Would I come see her at the end of the night?" Because at the end of the night, when she goes to bed, she likes to read her Bible. She invited me back for that. And then eventually I ran into her daughter one day in the elevator, by the elevator, and she said, Chaplain, my mom loves your visits. Please don't stop." And I thought about that and I said, had I said yes, we believe different things and walked out of the room, that would have ended. I would have never had this relationship. And what I learned about CPE, and we talk about this a lot, I'm sure others will share, our natural, innate human curiosity is the gift that we have to do the work that we do. Because the Quran says, we've made you different, so you will get to know each other. So you won't dislike each other. That to me is like the foundation of ministry or chaplaincy. In CPE, we're taught to be curious, to go in, to find out about people, what makes them sad, what makes them happy, what do they believe. So that was pivotal for me, that I could do this work, and it takes my human curiosity. It's laid out in the Quran how to do this, and I think I still carry that with me to today.
Appreciate you, Tahara. Ibrahim,
Thank you.
what's your story?
Well, there's so many. I'm sitting here while you guys were going over yours, just trying to pick one, but what came to mind as all of you were sharing those wonderful stories, I had a situation where an elderly person, which I think they were a retired colonel or general or something like that, said to me, um, I don't let anyone just come in here, especially chaplains. So
So
make it
he's
quick.
like he's sussing you out.
Yeah, right. And I said, well, sir, I'm the chaplain here. I'm making rounds, and I'm just checking in on you to see how you were doing, and if you wanted to talk or if you needed anything. And he said, well, to be honest with you, nobody comes in here and checks on
Mm.
you. And so two things happened, in terms of understanding chaplaincy a little bit better was uh, we're the people who are supposed to care about people and check on people, and also that we're, we're treading on precious time in precious moments. And he had already been given news about terminal illness, and so that was part of the reason he didn't want people coming in and out of there. He was grieving and angry, and so just to know that I've been trusted with those moments, and that the training that I received helped me remain present in those moments, uh, sold me on CPE, and then I think led me to want to train other chaplains to have those skills as well.
All right. So you guys talk about relationship and staying and learning about yourself. Like, so how is that showing up in your CPE context? Like, what are you doing with your own CPE formation that you're doing that for other people so they can do that for themselves?
Could you say the question one more
Yeah,
time? I just
Yeah,
want
or
to.
rephrase it. Yeah, or
yeah.
rephrase it.
Okay, okay, all right. How is that all of the stories of that formative experience of CPE for yourself? How is that showing up in your education right now in your context? The
Okay.
military, your
Okay.
trauma one? Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. So like one of the things that like I think about is like I'm aware of my own narrative and history to to help me sensitize and be empathetic to what my students are going through because there's so much disorientation that they're being invited to and learning the art of spiritual care wherever the context they're in. And it's important to capture that. Otherwise, if you just pass through it, then you can't use that. And that's a parallel to whatever their care recipients are going through. My concern is that if I don't pay attention to mine and you don't pay attention to yours, you're going to miss other people's that you're supposed to be serving. So it's about paying attention to my own and their own so that they can be more attentive to those dynamics for their care recipients. And those become the golden opportunities for reformation or islah or change. And that's how I use my own narrative and formation to keep giving. And that requires me to slow down and pay attention and be among peers like the folks on this call to support me continue to be able to continue the work. Because without reflection, we just become, I don't know, like you just become just like rituals. Like you're just ritually doing things. The reflection is really important. So that's something that helps me remain connected to the soul of the profession.
I appreciate that. I hear a lot of accountability. Where does that fit, Tahara or Ibrahim? Or just like what do you do in your education right now?
Well, you want to go to her?
No, go, you could go ahead, Ibrahim.
Yeah. So when I was a young CEC, Uh, my my guru, my
Hang on, you're still a young educator. You can claim that.
oh, a lot younger, trust me. um, I was, you know, excited about the process, but I had no idea what my educator was doing. It was intentional. He had theory that he was working with, and that part hadn't sunk in for me yet. And so I went to him. I said, "So why did you do this? Why did you say this? What was behind that with, when you were working with that patient or that student?" And he said, "Oh, Ibrahim, that's theory, which is something you got to learn about." And so tied into what Joab was saying is, when you're using theory, you don't have to guess about, what you're doing, and that spills over to the students you teach as well as all people you interact with, because you're assessing what's there and you're using your theory to basically translate what's happening in the moment, and then you fall back on those theories to help people and help yourself address really difficult moments in education as well as patient care. So that came up for me.
I want to go back to what Shazana, you used the word accountability, and I want to tie that into what Ibrahim and Jawada said. So, the reason we have theories, the reason we have CPE, and one of the core competencies in CPE is self-awareness, knowing what we're bringing to spiritual care encounters from our own lived experience, our family system, our religious identity or spiritual identity, but the ethical value of doing no harm is at the foundation of chaplaincy, because here in the United States, people have religious freedom. They have the freedom to say, I want a chaplain, I don't want a chaplain, I want to talk about a religion, I don't. So we have to be trained to be able to assess what are the spiritual needs. And if we are going in a room and going to be a help, or if someone says, I don't believe in religion, I don't believe in God, how we can navigate that and make sure we don't do harm. But ethical values are what also point us to our endorser. So chaplains have to be endorsed by a body. And then also, when you're looking at the outcomes of CPE as educators, we have ethical boundaries around how we teach. And like I think Ibrahim or Jawad said, the theories help keep us kind of congruent with the values of ACPE, adult learning theory, personality theory. So we have all these theories that we're working out of to keep good boundaries and to hopefully provide a good, solid learning environment. But ethical values, accountability are key, because unfortunately, people have been harmed by religion. And we have to be careful not to proselytize or um, push ourselves or do anything that's going to harm a vulnerable population. So that's students, that's patients in a maybe a mental health facility. Those are soldiers. You know, we have all of these sectors of chaplaincy where we serve, and we have to make sure that chaplains are trained in a way that's a professional chaplain, that we're not doing harm. And that's one of the reasons why it takes us so long to become a professional chaplain. It takes almost as long as it does to become a medical doctor. So value, accountability, I'm glad you brought that up, is very important around and with ethical boundaries.
Appreciate you all. So, I think you all allude to that. I want to hear from like maybe you want to give a snapshot of like what a day of Tahara and your CPE students look like. But like, how does this education that we are so precious to us different from other forms of learning?
You want, you- should I just, should I take?
Yeah.
I'll take it. I'll try first. How is it different from other like learning? Well, number one, we've been mentioning my 2 cents around this is that's experiential education. We did exit interviews recently, and the 7 students that graduated from my internship, they reported that we were surprised that there was no central text that we could keep referring to throughout. That was so different. And I was like, yes, it is different because you are and your patients are the documents you're learning about. This is experiential learning, and that increases vulnerability. And that's not often how we are learning in an academic setting, which is removed from where your constituents or the people you are tasked to serve with are. And so it becomes more of an intellectual experiment instead of a often. I mean, as much as we want to simulate, things in a graduate school, it's a simulation at the least. But now you're actually engaged with the vulnerability of your own, along with those you're tasked to serve with, and to learn using that experience. So it's almost like your experience is the authority, and so of the patient as well, and that raises the stakes. That it's experiential learning essentially, and then we do add didactics to help support that. Tahara and Ibrahim mentioned theory, that you're using that, you're doing spiritual assessments, you're doing spiritual needs, and you're constantly doing that with people you're tasked to serve. That's a learning experience, and that's very much what's missing, I believe, from places that, they're just different learnings. I'm so glad for my graduate school training. I needed it. It developed me. It gave me language and helped me frame things. And, everything has its place, and this has its place.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jawad. It's hard to follow that one, but when you were speaking, what came to mind was the clinical method of learning, the action, reflection, action. You know, you mentioned your master's graduate level education. It's not a whole lot of reflection. It's just, hey, this is due, get it done, read this, take this test, whatever. Whereas in CPE, there's a lot of, why did you do that? Why did you say that? What came up for you in that moment that caused those tears? All this reflection that's happening, which is if you're looking at just learning, more learning happens when you're reflecting than when you're doing or saying something. So that's a big part of this type of learning, is being able to be comfortable with reflecting and exploring what just happened, and why did I react this way versus a different way. So that's what came up for me.
And I thought about the vulnerability, and if those who have applied for CPE with ACPE, it's consistently asking, like from the first application, first part of your application, it's asking you, who are you? Who are you spiritually? Who are you? Who are your loved ones? Tell us about your family system, because we have to understand what we said this earlier, who we are and where we're coming from, our worldview, and how that's going to get in our way, or is it going to be a link to connect with other people. So we're consistently looking at who we are and how we respond to different situations. I work in a level one trauma hospital, so our students work a lot with families of maybe someone they kissed that morning, and the next thing they're getting a call from MedStar, Washington Hospital Center, that their loved one is in the trauma bay. So we're constantly learning about family systems dynamics. How we get touched, or if there's some transference, countertransference when you're working with a family, and this family looking like my family system, and there are things happening in this family system that reminds me of my family, and I'm getting touched. Now, either maybe I'm starting to overfunction, or maybe I'm trying to get out of the room. So that reflection that we talked about in the self-awareness is huge. And just some of the areas, just if you think about a trauma hospital, these are just some areas that students have to learn about, like trauma-informed care, spiritual assessment, and learning about people's trauma history, moral injury, grief and loss, PTSD, boundaries, family system. So when Jawad mentioned didactics, there's a lot of didactics that are happening, and then you take the information and how are you integrating what you're learning in working with people who are sick, people who maybe got a good bill of health, or maybe the diagnosis isn't what they hope for. So I think that thinking about each context and what students have to learn for that context is also important.
Hey,
Yeah. just one quick caveat. So the one common denominator in TPE learning is you. Um, Everything comes back to what you bring into the room, what you bring into the group, what you bring into the experience of CPE. So um, you get real acquainted with yourself and sort of the things that your habits you have, kind of things that you need to work on, growing edges. And I think that's really special about CPE that other types of learning just don't touch on at all. And so what you bring, flavors the moment every time. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you guys know how much I like CPE, so like, this is not anything new. It feels important and it has its place. So I guess like where I want to have the discussion right now about, the place where CPE experientially, formatively, individually, uniquely, that we've all engaged with it. Where do you think is the bias against it, or like, I'm not asking you to like debate. I guess I'm asking like, where do you feel like what people would miss, especially like in those places where their their context don't require CPE. What would they miss not doing CPE? Might you think? Why does CPE matter?
Um, I guess like it's like using a
Oh, whoa,
metaphor.
whoa! What's that smile about? Tell me about that smile.
Who's smiling? I think
You,
we're all
you,
smiling. Who, me?
yours? Yeah,
Who, me? Well, I'm gonna
yeah.
tell you right now.
Okay.
So, um, I'm thinking about food. That's why you guys know how much I love food. It's an ingredient, and sure, can you make food without certain ingredients? But it's not always going to come out the right way. So I'm just like, I don't know. I don't. This is an imperfect analogy, but I really do think that salt is. It's a key ingredient in food. But I don't. But like, I don't. I don't like the part where like it doesn't where it falls flat in terms of like too much or too little. But in terms of like a key ingredient, like salt is a key ingredient in a lot of food. And I don't know. I'm just like thinking that that's kind of that's what I think is missing, because the stuff that we were just describing previously, those are all about relationships. And as far as I know, all of chaplaincy, regardless of the institutional setting you're in, including like congregational, like for those who are like leading massages and stuff, like they need this too because you're working with people. So if you're responsible for spiritual and religious care, you need CPE just like you would need a certain ingredient in certain kind of cuisines you would be making. And that's just how it is. And you could do without it. And then I had this group of seven no six Muslims that I taught um over in the US like in 24, and one of them was a university chaplain, and he was currently like his clinical placement was at a university, and he said that he was an imam for about 10 years, and he said like I had to change, and he went to another profession. I think he did IT, and then he came to this because he still wanted to do something that was still meaningful, so he did a clinical placement. At the end, what he told me was, I wish I did this then, and then I wouldn't have burned out. I wish I had done this then, and I would have been a better imam to my congregants. Because this is the one thing that gets you your grounding in the way that Tahara and Ibrahim and I have been discussing recently. That's a quick hack. You want a heuristic, this is the way, but it requires something. It requires your vulnerability, and that's scary. And so, and I have to name that. There is a vulnerability in it because the authority of your experience is not in what, Al-Ghazali said, it's in yours. And that's very different. And you cannot quote somebody else. You got to quote your own self.
Yeah.
All right, JB. Go
Mhm.
ahead, Ibrahim.
Yeah. Wonderfully said,
You
Jawad.
were wondering why I was smiling. That's why.
Yeah.
It, um, I would just add to that. You mentioned vulnerability. I think empathy is centered there too, and you get empathy from learning about your own pain, your own suffering, your own trials, and then being able to draw from that when you're trying to help someone else. And so, being really, really aware of your own trials and pain helps you to connect with other people. And I think, along with relationships, being able to understand and connect with people is another big part of being a good chaplain. Um, and with those ingredients, understanding that being vulnerable is what makes people want to connect with you, and then also being able to see and understand other people's struggles and trials. Along with that, being a professional is important because you're working in a sea of professionals in whichever field of chaplaincy you go into. And they expect us to show up and be professional and to know what we're doing and have, a care plan that's going towards helping people, and not making a bunch of excuses, not being able to get, um, to try to pass off our work to someone else. We understand what we need to do, and we get after it. And so, being a professional with those skills, I think, is a big part of it.
I just wanted to share. I shared this earlier before we came on with all of the attendees, but today I have a surprise. I had a former student from uh, last year texted me and says, "Hey, I'm here at the hospital. Are you free? I'd like to say hello." And I said, "Oh, yeah." And so they came up and they said that, I just wanted to tell you that thank you for CPE, and they're ordained now and in a church not far from where I am, but they were talking about how much they learned in CPE and how different it was than the academic work, but how much it's helping them in their congregation with the families and the children and so forth. So it was nice to, because sometimes, with chaplaincy, we say it's airy work. We never know if our presence helped. We do believe that we are helpful, but we don't always get to hear back from people. So it was nice to hear from him to just say, "Hey, I want to come and say thank you. It has been helping me in my ministry." And, sorry I had a little pushback at times because part of vulnerability is, I think, and Ibrahim has this great tool in his office where it's a mirror, where you have to see yourself. CPE, you have people in a group who are sharing with you how they're experiencing you, are curious about you. So I'm saying that to say it can be very vulnerable. And he was saying something about like, I pushed back a little bit, but I learned and it's been helping me. So I think to answer your question, what would it be like without CPE? If this particular student, I think maybe would have a different experience within his congregation based on what he was sharing with me today.
All right, so
Tahar,
I'm gonna,
one more thing, Shazana. Tahar, you
yeah.
you used a book that I remember when I was starting to get into this because part of how I got into the training was like we were able to connect. But you did a presentation on this text. All
Shazana.
right, Shazana. I hope it's a good
I
thing it's
hope
not
that's
Ramadan.
espresso.
Yeah. Um. Uh. So you had this text, Tahara, that you talked about, you used that introduced me. It was called Recalling Our Own Stories. And that text is really
Yes.
interesting because he actually talks about how these people who at that time, like I think the book was like published in the 90s, so there wasn't as many
Hmm.
Muslims. I'm sure today if it was in there, he probably would have had a
Hmm.
bit more Muslim religious leaders in there because he was taking people on a retreat, these Christians and these
Yes.
Jews, and he basically was saying how a lot of the work that they needed to do was self-awareness, but these people were burning out. These people are
Exactly.
burning out, like in their profession, because of this idea of perfect empathy, that they needed to be all
Yes.
things at all times for everybody without any self-awareness and boundaries. But it was so interesting because he
Hmm.
was giving it for spiritual caregivers.
Hmm.
But it's in the
Exactly.
context of recalling our own stories. And he talks about how CPE is a way for religious caregivers, spiritual caregivers to remain rooted in the professions for the long term. Yeah, you're gonna get everyone's gonna get by. Don't get me wrong, for the first few days, for the first few months. But without something, and that's what his claim is, that it can keep you rooted. Right, Tahara? Something
Mm-hmm.
is that a good
Yeah.
synopsis?
Yes, and I use his book in CPE and in seminary. And the title itself is kind of reiterating what we're talking about. We're recalling our own stories to develop our self-awareness about how we may show up to serve. We
You
may
talk
have learned
are you talking about Edward Wimberley?
Edward Wimberley. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah. So CPE, what I've learned is, our story is what it is. It's linear, but as with more self-awareness and more, emotional intelligence and the work that we do on ourselves, maybe how we share it is different, or what we glean from it is different. We have new awareness about certain parts of our life and our story. So CPE helps a lot with that, because
Yeah,
Wimberly is saying we may have developed a myth about ourselves, like, oh, I have to do everything right, or else that, and we learn, maybe that's not helpful for me. Maybe that's not true. I'm sorry, Ibrahim, you're gonna say something.
no, you're spot on. I was just going to say that we learn dysfunction, but we don't know it's dysfunction until somebody brings it to our attention when it's not really working in our lives or in our ministry or whatever we're trying to do. Um, and with the boundaries things, this is a teaching aid I give students. I don't know if you guys can see that, but since Susanna went and got an espresso, I figured I'd share it right here. It says, "Is that a realistic expectation?"
You don't
Right?
have
And
that on my face.
I just pull this out and take a sip, and this. Oh wow, probably I'm putting way too much on my plate, or I'm not really being realistic about this expectation, and it gets me thinking about boundaries. So
Hey, that
I
that
use a
is
lot
a
of teaching aids like that. So
I
Yes.
is that's a mirror without saying it's a mirror or without showing the mirror.
well, if you want the mirror, I'll
Mhm.
show you.
Yes,
Show
yeah,
us.
everyone has a cool mirror.
Yeah.
Ah,
Self-awareness.
we need that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I just politely just raise this up, and that gets everybody thinking. Oh, wait a minute. Let's
Like like
slow
talk to the
down and
hand,
pay
talk to the hand
attention.
kind of.
Pay
Yeah.
attention.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then
But
I'm gonna.
and the
Uh-huh.
first time I brought it out, they thought it was a paddle, and they thought I was gonna give them a spanking.
Oh God.
I'm sorry.
Well, no, well, that's maybe the military context, maybe like within the, people, older adults, it's a gentle CPE process a little bit. Okay, I want to challenge all three of you um, in 5 words or less. How would you say, fill in the blanks, chaplaincy without CPE is?
I have one word: incomplete. And you don't know what you don't know, so you may think, you may be doing really good things. It's just so much more to learn about that profession, and CPE is what really opens the door to that.
Tahara Jawad, chaplaincy without CPE is?
Very incomplete.
Okay. Tahara?
Uh, yeah, I was gonna say incomplete. That was the word, and Jawad stole it. Yeah, and you don't know what you don't know. Hmm.
I like that. It's kind. It feels, it's weighted in a accountability kind of way, but you're not pushing. All right.
Hmm.
Let's emanate that to the universe, inshallah. Okay. Well then, what do you like for people to know about CPE if they don't have it and they're, um, prospective students?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's not easy. And so I think students need to know that going into it, that it may be some of the hardest learning in your life, yet the most beneficial and rewarding, right? And so anything worth having is, worth a little bit of sacrifice. So uh, it's typically in addition to everything else you got going on in your life, it's some of the hardest learning you ever had in your life and challenging work that you're going to do. But on the other side of it, it makes you a totally, you know, sound and trustworthy person and chaplain, and really every other area of your life, marriage, parenting, leading your congregation, all of that comes gets way better because of the training. So yes, very difficult. Make sure people understand that, but it's very rewarding.
I think perhaps to the difficult piece, Ibrahim, it's perhaps like emotionally demanding piece because of like how much you're learning at a rapid pace and the disorientation you're facing with things that you may have only faced like with your own family like once every 5 years, but now you're seeing that like every day, pretty much. But it's emotionally demanding, and I mean, if you're in a chaplain residency, for instance, where you're getting paid, that might be your only job, hopefully, and you're maybe not be in seminary or in a graduate school. So maybe that might be a little bit more easier to balance, but that doesn't remove the emotional demand that it requires of your soul and spiritual as well, because there's a lot of meaning making and reformulation and theological kind of reflection you're doing to make sense of why is all this happening. That's why I think it's hard. Now, the internship though, like that's where you're not paid. That really speaks to what Abraham's talking about because you'll be doing multiple things at once. So for instance, when I would do the summer internship, which is usually like a 12-week program or something, they're unpaid full time and they're still like having other things going on. So I would just tell them, talk to your family, make sure that you got their support because it's going to be demanding. If they're doing the internship that's during the year, it's the same thing during the interview. I just remind them like make sure you're doing an inventory of your responsibilities since there'll be unintended things because you're going to have to like you're going to be, you just don't know what it is, but we can tell you it's going to be emotionally demanding. Now, the good thing about the process in CP is that when I teach it, and this is because of my dissertation work, I frame CPE as the Hajj pilgrimage. In other words, it has a beginning and it has an end. And you're supposed to do it with other people. So as you're facing the difficulties, you are not alone. You're with others. So that's the usefulness. So if you're used to being very self-sufficient, you're actually going to have a good invitation to use the group to support you, and that's part of the learning. And that'll be good for you when you finish because that's exactly what you need when you're a professional. You need people to support you. And that's the thing that really leads to burnout. The number of I have a senior pastor who had extreme burnout. Like I'm talking about chronic exhaustion physically, and he said that in seminary, my friends was saying to me, "Oh, come, you got to do the CP. It's going to help you." He's like, "Nah, I'm just going to take this Baptist denominational thing instead." So he took that course instead, and he's back now, 15 years later after having suffered burnout, like chronic exhaustion and like epilepsy and strokes and all that stuff because he didn't know the stuff he didn't know. And it's never too late. So he's back and now he's refinding his he's like regrounding himself in his calling.
Yeah. So emotional is not hard for people who are naturally gifted in that area. So they'll breeze through that part to why it's some of us folks who are maybe a little less emotionally open. We may be challenged with that, but I think the challenge is you're going to have to explore parts of yourself that you don't want to explore. You got to go in that closet of skeletons and look around in there and not only are you going to be you know uncovering things that you didn't know about yourself, but so are other people going to be uncovering those things for you, and that's really difficult. That's really challenging, and just about everything about you will be challenged in some way. That's
Mhm.
for me, that I think that's the really hard part, because even if you're really good emotionally coming into this, you're still going to be challenged a lot in a lot of ways.
Mm.
Maybe that, I mean, I would include that in emotional, because that's emotionally demanding, the pieces that are challenging us. Just that.
Mhm. Can you all hear me? My screen just changed. Oh. Um, One of the things I tell students is that you learn new language on how to talk to people and how to, because just to back up a little bit, the role of a chaplain, especially in a hospital setting, is you're a member of the greater interdisciplinary team. And just like a doctor does a history and physical, a nurse does a nursing assessment, we provide a spiritual assessment. So we're listening in a way that maybe we haven't been taught to listen, and we're responding to people in a way that would be helpful. So if I've been taught that when I hear somebody struggling, I need to fix it, or I need to offer a solution, then you're going to be learning something different, because that's not how you respond in a spiritual care encounter. We don't try to fix people. And so I think CPE also has this very human element, and it's a reminder. Like I think about, oh, that could be my child in the trauma bay. That could be me, and I have been a patient. So it really humanizes us to see the struggles of people, and we learn that maybe some of the responses we've learned can sound very insensitive. So we learn different ways to respond to people's pain and suffering. So it's transformative, I would say. And the challenge is that are you okay with being changed? That people can change you and impact you and how you see the world in a way that can help, deepen your ministry and your chaplaincy.
Yeah. So just to circle back, um, CPE is the kind of learning where if you had grief that you never addressed in your life, it's gonna invite you to do that, right? If you had a bad relationship with your parents, it's gonna explore that with you, right? And see where it shows up in your relationship with me as your educator. If you had a bad
Mhm.
relationship with your dad, right?
Mhm.
Or your siblings and your peers in your group, those parallels, right? And so it's challenging because it really takes you back to those things, and it causes you to engage the things you don't want to engage. And obviously, you get to choose whether you do it or not, but your ability to be present or get triggered and things like that will show when you don't do that kind of work. And we haven't even touched on the traumas, which most educators are going to invite you to use therapeutic work for, which I highly recommend to do that congruent with your CPE work, because you're going to get triggered on some of those things. If you have those in your past, you're going to need to do that work so that you can engaged in the learning.
Can I?
So
Oh,
go ahead, Tara. Sorry.
well, can I just reiterate what Ibrahim's saying? Why should I have to do that? Why do I need to know about my story and all that? Because it's almost inevitable that you're going to meet yourself in CPE. You're going to meet yourself in your ministry, and depending on how much work we've done on who we are and our story and what we're aware of, will impact how we interact. I've seen my dad, my mom, myself, my son. You see people and experience scenarios that take you right back to your story, and we have to know how to navigate that in a way that's healthy and it won't harm the person that we're caring for.
Um, I'm quoting Ramdas, so sorry about that. I'm
Okay.
just saying the way he says, "Oh, you think that you've achieved self-actualization, or like go and spend, the weekend or the week with your family, like and then you'll crawl back to think like, okay, I'm a kid again, or whatever that triggers us." There's a question here that I want to speak or to name out, because I think we all have had experience, especially with the pandemic, of moving our in-person CPE experience to a online one. Um, say more about that. What would be the difference between both
Mhm.
in your own experience? Do you feel like online would be a less challenging one than an in-person CPE?
So the questions about virtual versus in-person CPE. Well, this is interesting. I've done both. Let me give you my experience on it, but everyone here on this call I think, has some experience with doing both. So, and some of us more on one than the other. Um, well, Ibrahim will be useful for have this question too, because he does a lot of this. So, all right, contextually, this is what's happening, okay? So I want to speak to one context I work in. So I provide in-person clinical pastoral education. I'm in an institutional setting that's a hospital. So what's happening is is that CP online is offering accessibility and flexibility, whereas I don't have as much of that to offer. I can't just offer my in-person program somewhere else or like a different time or something like that. There's just a little less flexibility. So the people who are going to be drawn to this area to work with me are going to be people who probably live in the area, the geographical area. The other thing about the in-person like that often if there's going to be in-person clinical pastoral education being taught, they're going to also offer you the clinical placement. And you're providing a service for the institution where the CPE is at. The institution is paying the educator and for the accreditation for the program so that we offer spiritual care to, like in my case, patients and families and staff at my setting. So there's an investment culturally and institutionally to ensure that that care is being provided. That means that not only is ACPE providing me accreditation, but I'm also having to speak to my stakeholders, which are my administrators. So I have dual um, people to attend to, sometimes triple, depending on this. Like when I was at Cleveland Clinic, we had the accreditation for Cleveland Clinic, and we had the accreditation for ACPE, plus the stakeholders, which were our bosses. So that's something that's happening here. That's often when it's in person, and that's I think useful to understand. And when I've done online clinical pastoral education, then what's happening is there's flexibility and accessibility, which means that the student can place themselves at a self-selected location. Sometimes an online program might have some pre-established locations, but some many may often don't. And so then you establish, let's just say you want to do CPE at a university, excuse me, if you want to do chaplaincy or spiritual care at a university setting, you get an administrator to sign off on it, and then you provide that to the ACP certified educator at that online program, and you have an agreement, and then that's how you get your clinical experience, and then the learning then is done online. I just want to speak to that part. If folks want to speak to other things, you can. I want to, but I just want to I'll help you understand the frame of what's happening when we say in person versus that. And now, if you all want to add to that, and then or speak to how the education is different, Tahara and Ibrahim, please do, or the same.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same education. And you're going to feel the pressure of all the learning that's there that Susanna graciously developed those slides. You're going to have to do all that work, whether it's virtual or in person. But I think obviously being in a room together is different. So there's a plus to that. But minus that, the learning opportunity is still going to be something like if you haven't done any CPE, it's going to be something like you've never experienced before.
And I would just add that before COVID, I thought, oh my God, no way. CPE online is it's just you can't connect, you can't. And I saw something different. You can have very close group dynamics and develop relationships and great learning on online. So it's different. And people, depending on where you are, I think Joelle was saying it's you have access. You can jump on a line and have a class and then go maybe 5, 10 miles away in your area and do your clinical work. So it's just about your preference, it's about your life, family dynamics or whatever works out best for you. But like Ibrahim was saying, the learning, the outcomes that you're meeting, the hours that you have to get in, all of those are the same whether you're online or in person.
So something that's logistical is that many of the online programs are can some in-person programs are expensive, but a lot of online programs that are accredited by ACP and for that matter, maybe even other ones, are tend to be a little bit more expensive. And that's because of how they're funded. So my hospital foots the bill. So I charge what, like I think like $600 a unit for an internship, and my residents they pay 350 a unit. Some places don't even charge for residents for their things, but you're probably not gonna have like it's like if it's like a purely online CPE program, you're probably not gonna have a residency like a paid stipend thing. Probably not. I could be wrong. Mostly internship. So there is a fee structure that likely will be different. I think like the going rate for most of them are between what like maybe 2,500 to 30 to 4,000 maybe. There are a few places that are cheaper. You can seek it out, but not often it's going to be that if that's a reality, then you have to just take that into account.
Panelists, my dear loving colleagues, I thank you. You've shown up in your only in yourselves. You answer questions like that, and I think Zakia has a storage of questions that you right from
Yeah,
our.
if it's okay, I'd like to just kick off our Q&A. And if folks have questions, you're welcome to raise your hand and wait and speak them, or you can throw them in the chat. But I wanted to kick off Q&A with just a set of sort of a bundle of basic questions about, if I'm interested in CPE. I have been convinced by you all in your wonderful experiences that this is something I must do. What are, how do I go about finding a CPE unit? Are they only available through ACPE? Or are there other places? Are they only in hospital settings? Or, Jawad, you referenced being able to do a CPE unit on a college campus. And then are all CPE units created equal? If I do one here with this organization in this setting, will it be the same as, if I do it over here with this organization? So I think just a basic rundown of the, what are the options available for someone looking to sign up with one?
Can I help? So what Jawad is saying and more. For example, we provide CPE at my location. It's just a care facility for older adults. Part of our CPE program, we touch on spirituality of aging, meaning, you are going to learn about hospice care, dementia care as part of your learning experience. It's not, a care facility for older adult is community focused, healthcare adjacent. So, we don't, it's not a trauma one. You're going to build long-term relationships with a lot of these older adults and team members who, we have team members who work there for 50 years. So, so that CPE program is going to be very, very different than I'm imagining what you will learn in a hospital setting. And we also are able, in our program, for you to not have to do your clinicals at our site, that you can do it at a place of your choice. For example, in my CPE unit, I grew up in this program for my first CPE, and I'm finishing out, inshallah, my educator training there. I was a neighborhood ambassador at a local um, low income housing community. So I did my CPE clinicals, in that site. So we can do clinical placement agreements, with different spaces. So for the question about can you have CPE at a prison juvenile facilities? Yes. Different CPE programs can help you do that. Or you can reach out and then, the CPE program can do a clinical placement agreement.
Um, the the one one question that was there, I believe, was about how do you learn about it, like where to find it. I mean, I'm an ACP certified educator, so I believe in our accreditation. I believe in our programming. So I find it's only in good faith for me to just talk about the things I have experienced. There are other places if that have it, but you know, uh, we're I'm an ACP. I'm like so if you go to acp.edu, which is there's an accredited program directory, and you can filter the results by state, or you can even filter them by online only. So like my program does like partial online, for instance, like I'll do individual supervision. I might even do some classes online, but that's for convenience. It's not to make it so that geographically people from different areas can come into my program necessarily. Um, so like there'll be programs like mine that might stay online, but it's not like a true online program. So do you have an option to select online only? And so then what's going to happen is you'll be able to then in give them tuition, and then what happens is you find the clinical placement like a university or like a juvenile or prison setting. You, you speak to the administrator there. There's going to be a form. You sign it. You bring it to that educator, and then you have the agreement for the learning to take place. I mean, the quickest way is to just do that. So go to the ACP website, and that's how you can do that. Now, the other question was around whether ACP programs will often accept other ACP units. So I'll accept a student who's learned with any of the four folks here at their programs. If they apply to my program for residency, I'd consider them very strongly as opposed to another place. Particularly, this has to do with board certification, also the standards and like the kind of culture we want. There are other ones. I think it's just useful for you to know that if you decide to go anywhere else, think about your trajectory and your future. If you think that if you go with a different organization that it's better for you, that's fine. But also think about what's going to be good for you, um, pragmatically too. This is going to open up doors for me and things like that. And it's just what it is. It's what the market is. ACP has 94% of the is in terms of the market of CPE provision, it has 94% of the market. And that means that people like us are in those locations, and it's just kind of what it is. Um, yeah. So
Yeah, thanks for that, Jawad. I would just follow that up with our certified educator candidate program is way more uh, extensive and qualitative. So you because of that long hard work of the educator, the quality of education is so much better in ACPE. So that's not because of bias. That's just because I've looked at some of the other programs and how long it takes their CECs to finish, and there's no way they can learn what the ACP ECEs learn in that short amount of time.
Mhm. And ACB has the history. We've been around since 1967. And also, I find that our standards for training, level one, level two, and certified educator candidates, it's a very, very robust programs, very laid out, structured. So I do have a bias, but ACPE is our tagline is, we are the standard. We're the standard for spiritual care and education.
Javeria Ahmad has their hand up.
Mm.
Thank you.
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah khair
Awesome.
for the session. It was great. But all that I was hearing was that CPE, and most of it was concentrating on the educational aspect of it. And I'd like to bring out and ask about the spiritual experience of the CPE program, and ask each one of you if you can share or name one change that you felt or you experienced in yourself after you completed either one or more of your units of CPE, especially in your leadership or in your personality, and or something that you noticed in somebody else, the change that you felt in personalities who went through this process, a common change. And is it different for different individuals? Is it a different journey for different individuals?
Um, for me, education is spiritual. The Prophet said, go into China, to seek knowledge. I mean, like it's a spiritual, religious, like for me, experience. I feel like I'm constantly praying because to know myself is to know my Lord. Do you know what I'm referencing? So, um, for me, that's constant. And the second thing is, give you an example of a student that just graduated, and she's been in therapy for about 5, 7 years. She was a parentified child. Her mother suffered from bipolar disorder and um, uh, who had many stints in the psychiatric facility. So her dad depended on her to take care of her brother with cerebral palsy, and then the other sister disconnected because of so much pressure that was there. So that had ramifications uh, ongoing, and I was just engaged in the supervisory relationship and alliance with her. By the end of the program, by engaging the patients and the families and the staff, her work with the peers, and her bringing verbatims that brought out some of that story, which was not what she was intentionally trying to do. She was trying to figure out, why did I miss this? What was happening over there? Jawad, why did I speak so, like, why did I shut you out? And I'm like, by having these kinds of conversations, all of that came to the forefront. At the end, she just said to me, like, for me, like the word therapeutic means healing. You can find many things can be therapeutic. Exercise can be therapeutic. CPE can be therapeutic. Okay. So she said this has been one of the most therapeutic experiences that I've ever had, which has helped me be a better chaplain, spiritual caregiver to these patients. Like, this is unbelievable that although this is not the primary goal of what I was trying to do, I've gotten this secondary benefit. And that's what's shifted her personality. She's more differentiated, and this isn't her first unit. Like, she's more differentiated. She has better boundaries. She can say no. She had somebody who was wanted to was approaching her, like sexually advancing on her, like a family member. He was a bit not, he wasn't with it. And she came to me, she's like, what am I supposed to do here? And I said, well, whatever you're feeling right now is normal. Okay. It's okay for you to feel what you're feeling, to feel afraid or feel anger. Normalize that. And then I told her that, that, that it's appropriate for you to have boundaries. You do not need permission of anybody for you to feel respected and to have boundaries. These are the kinds of stuff that happen, but why I bring in that experience up is that this is sometimes very existential. She lost her boundaries and her family relational stuff. These things get activated in current day dynamics, and then they feel guilt about having boundaries. Why? No woman or guy for that matter should be advanced in that way. And but this is how in real time it's coming up, and that they're trying to process these things. And that's the kind of stuff that we can catch in CP because the clinical engagement is so readily available that things like this can come up, and then they're then investigating their story and how that actually happened. For me, it's not enough for you to just memorize a skill. Because if you want to, because it's kind of like having a car. You can have the navigation, but if your engine's not working, it's not going to take you anywhere.
That was a very passionate response to why. I don't know if we want to follow that or not, but um, the sister's question is one of the questions I remember having early on, and what one of the things that I came to realize is that everybody who's either a CPE student or a educator, their very much grounded in their theology. And so I would never recommend anyone who's still trying to figure that part out. I wouldn't recommend CPE yet. I mean, get all that to where that's not an issue for you, because again, CPE is going to challenge you in a lot of ways. And if you don't have that part worked out, that's the first thing that's going to kind of get derailed is your spiritual foundation. So, and then the other thing I would say is, if you remember the tradition of the prophet who used to walk a certain way, and then somebody used to throw trash on him every day, and then that person stopped doing it, and he asked questions about what happened to that person. They told him this man was sick. He went to visit him. It's one thing to be, a fair weather believer. It's another thing to go into very trying and hard situations and be a spiritual presence for someone, right? Go against, in this case, a clear enemy of his own, right? Go against all that to see how that person's spirit and soul was doing. That's really the next level of spirituality. So as Jawad was pointing to, you're going to be much more um, uh, tied to your spirituality because of this learning process. You're gonna lean heavily on it. And one of the practices I had with my students would, every morning someone would bring a spiritual devotional, and we would start with that. That was the grounding of every day, because this is what it's about. When you going out here and a couple lost their child in childbirth, what are you going to say to them if you're not grounded yourself, right? And you don't have a spring from where you draw to keep you replenished in situations like that. So yeah, it's a good question. It's very important, but definitely want to be grounded before you start this work.
Yeah, and I would just add, like earlier, we were talking about how the application process and entering into CPE asks you, who are you? It also asks, who are you spiritually, theologically, philosophically? Um, one of the traditions I've drawn upon was a Hadith Qudsi where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I was sick and you didn't visit me. And then the person says, oh, Allah, you Lord of all the worlds, how could we have visited you? And the person says, well, Shazana, my servant was, I'm using your name. Shazana, my servant was sick. And if you would have gone to visit Shazana, you would have been in my presence. So that's been a foundational spiritual um, treasure, gem that I hold on to for my ministry. And I thought, man, this feels like a direct invitation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to visit people who are struggling, who are having that jihad of self, or a difficult diagnosis, or family trouble. So that's just part of my foundation, but each student has to come in and talk about, what is your theological, we call it value-based system. What are you standing upon spiritually or philosophically to do this work? So you're constantly exploring that, constantly exploring your story, and it all gets integrated. So I have others, but the other one for me is when our prophet, peace be upon him, he was talking about um, like, or where we learned that for every footstep we take towards someone who's sick or struggling, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showers us in mercy. So these are things that are my spiritual foundation. And as I work in CPE and even teach students today, these are foundational principles I'm drawing from for myself. And there's much more that we do. Like Ibrahim talked about, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, our students come and they give a spiritual reflection in the hospital chapel, where they have to prepare something that will be appropriate for an institution. That if the president walked in, someone who just walked in off the street, someone who cleans floors, whomever walks in, they can hear the message, and it's not something that is um, just specific to my faith. It's something that I have to open up to reach everyone. So these are the things that they learn in CPE, and you draw from your spiritual foundation for that.
Any other questions? Arif.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Thank you very much for wonderful lecture and the suggestions. So I live in Hawaii, geographically isolated. The question I have is kind of a programmatic. We have only CP options we have is through a Christian ministry, and so we do not have any chaplaincy services in the university in Hawaii, even in the correctional facilities. So what do you suggest for someone who, I mean, I will not take chaplaincy as a profession, but I'm training myself to offer services to the university and the correctional facilities. If I want to do CP and learn those skills, being geographically isolated, what kind of program I can enroll into, which will allow me to do some of those practical sessions in Hawaii, or maybe fly for a weekend and do something. What do you suggest due to my geographically isolated situation? How should I approach having me trained myself in CP?
Brother Arab, could you clarify? You said that the program that was a Christian program.
There's only one program, and this is not a Christian program. That is through a health system. I mean, healthcare facility system.
Yeah, it's the Pacific Ministry.
Pacific Ministry, yes. That's the only
Yes.
ministry you have in Hawaii, yes.
Yeah, and I know who leads that, or who's there. Would there be any reason why you can't work with them?
I can work with them, but my goal is to training myself is to offer support in the university and correctional facility.
Okay.
So I mean, would you suggest that this is
So here's my 2 cents on that is that you're learning the art of spiritual care. So whatever context you do it in, it it may not be relevant because you can transfer that learning wherever you go. A lot of the things that we were describing are processes of engagement that you transfer wherever you are. You're still dealing with people. Now, you're saying that the context matters. Okay, maybe. Like if you want to do a chaplain residency, for instance, it's useful because you're getting an intensive experience in the hospital setting that can take you maybe into becoming a staff chaplain. Makes more sense. But if you're doing an internship at the Pacific Ministries there, over there, you can. It's actually like such a rich environment that if it's accessible driving wise, like it behooves you to at least consider that because you're going to get such a rich, intense experience. And then the students, or in other words, your peers will also be there. So you have more of a fellowship with other people while you're going through it. That is a benefit of doing an in-person uh, CPE program where they have where the institution sponsors it is that the other students are there typically are with you. Not all the time, but enough there with you so that even after outside the classroom, you'll still see them like on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. And then you transfer that learning wherever you go. I have military chaplains that come in through my program, but they're learning they're learning CPE methodology and all that, and then they're still transferring that even though they're in a chaplain candidate program. You get what I'm saying? So like it's very common for all four of us to have people who want to do something like you, but they come do the CPE learning using the context of the hospital because they can still transfer that wherever they go. The other thing is that it'll probably be less expensive if you if you go also in person, if you have that capacity. But there are a lot of online programs that can also suit your needs, and then you just find the setting to create an agreement.
I understand. Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe one quick follow-up question. So there was a question on the chat as well. The online CP training versus in-person. I mean, I want to add to that question, which one is more effective, or which one do you suggest if we have the means?
Yeah, again, I don't think there's that big of a difference. It really depends on your educator. You know, we've talked a little bit about different centers and different environments, but ultimately it comes down to your educator, and they're the ones that you know going to give you a really good experience or not. And ACPE is, you know, like you said, in the highest level of quality educators that you're going to find. So yeah, trust me, if I had you online, you'd be begging to go to an in-person one because it's going to be the same kind of learning. Trust me.
Thank you very much.
Take the interview seriously. So interview even ACP educators, online or in person. Take it seriously. See how much of a fit it is. The educator does matter.
Understand. Thank you.
Okay, well, we are right at time. So I want to first thank our panelists. Thank you so much. I personally learned a lot. And just just sitting here wrapped, listening to your experiences. And I wrote down some. You all have a way with words, and I wrote down some phrases that I was hoping I was going to get to ask you to sort of expound on, but I didn't. So inshallah, future conversations, we can come back to some of those themes and some of those ideas. I think, Jawad, you said the art of the profession, the soul of the profession. And I'm like, let's hold a session on each of those, because I'd love to get your thoughts and, other chaplains' thoughts on each of those. But yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Shazana, for moderating. I hope, those who participated, got the information that you were looking for from a session like this. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is session 2 of a series of 5. And so we do have the certification endorsement as well as the traditional Islamic sciences education sessions coming up. The links are in the chat for you to be able to look at those, take a look to see if those are of interest to register. AMC members, our retreat registration, final announcement is, retreat registration should be live within the next 24 hours. So please check your emails for that, inshallah. So that should be going live. And I hope, each of you is able to make it, inshallah, to what will be a intense and memorable experience, inshallah. Thank you so much, everybody. If you have any follow-up questions, you can always go to the AMC website and use the contact form there to send us questions. And we do look at those and we do respond to those, inshallah. So yeah. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
How many participants did you have, Zakia?
Well, let's see. We've got 16, including all of us right now, but I think we had 20 something earlier. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll round it for 20. We're